It was a morning when soft spring sunlight poured down on the quiet residential streets of Greenwich. I stood in the kitchen, preparing breakfast as usual. The savory aroma of bacon wafted through the room, and thinly sliced tomatoes made a vivid red contrast against the white plate. "Mom, look!" Ethan's voice rang out from the living room table. When I turned around, my son was arranging his watercolor paints, moving his brush with intense concentration. Even before breakfast, he couldn't resist painting. "What beautiful use of colors," I said, and Ethan beamed with a broad smile. He was painting spring flowers with a delicate touch that seemed beyond his 10 years. "Jenny, about Ethan's birthday party this weekend." Robert looked up from his new project documents and spoke in a quiet voice. "Yes, I've already started the preparations. I've contacted the parents of his friends too. We should invite Mother as well." At those words, my hands froze for a moment. Eleanor. My husband's mother. Just the thought of her name sent a slight chill down my spine. "Yes." My response was ambiguous, and I noticed Ethan's brush stop moving beside me. That afternoon, while checking my schedule for new property viewings, I was packing Ethan's favorite sandwiches in his lunchbox. Robert had already finished preparing for work and gave me his usual goodbye kiss before leaving. "Have a good day," I called after him, and Robert waved with a smile. At that moment, I didn't realize how precious these ordinary morning scenes were. At 2 p.m., my phone rang during a scheduled property viewing. It was Greenwich Middle School. "Mrs. Wilson, Ethan isn't feeling well." When I arrived at the nurse's office, Ethan was curled up on the bed. His face was pale, with tears in his eyes. "What's wrong, Ethan?" "My stomach hurts." His voice was trembling. As I was about to take him home, Ethan whispered in a small voice, "I don't want to go to grandmother's house." Those words made my heart skip a beat. It was while stopping at the supermarket on our way home. My cart lightly bumped into someone else's, and when I turned around, there was Sarah. A woman I'd met several times at church gatherings. Jennifer. There was something urgent in her expression. "Would you like to grab a coffee? I have something important to tell you." When we sat facing each other at a nearby Starbucks, Sarah looked around before lowering her voice. "I'm concerned about Ethan." Those words sent a chill down my spine. "Did something happen?" Sarah began speaking slowly, as if choosing her words carefully. Though she didn't touch on specifics, her implications weighed heavily on my heart. That night, after getting into bed, I brought up the conversation with my husband. "Robert, I met Sarah today." When I relayed Sarah's warning, Robert fell silent for a moment. "Mother has always been like that. Try not to worry too much." Those words only amplified my anxiety. "Let's have the party at our house," I said with determination. I wanted to protect Ethan where I could keep an eye on him. The morning of the birthday party began with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety in the air. Spring sunlight flooded the garden, and cherry blossom petals danced in the wind. I had been decorating the garden with balloons and banners since early morning. The blue and white striped tablecloth swayed in the breeze, and the letters, "Happy Birthday Ethan," sparkled in the light. "Let's make a space for presents on this table." Sarah, who had arrived earlier than planned, was helping arrange the tables. There was a hint of tension in her expression. "Jennifer, I need to talk to you after the party." Just as I was about to turn around at her words, the kitchen timer went off. "Oh, the cupcakes are done." When I hurried back to the kitchen, the smell of vanilla filled the air. The homemade cupcakes were made with plenty of Ethan's favorite blueberries. I'd colored the frosting his favorite light blue and carefully decorated each one. The main birthday cake was specially ordered from Whole Foods. They had recreated the design from one of Ethan's recent watercolors on top of the cake. "Mom, can I see my birthday cake?" Ethan came running into the kitchen, his eyes sparkling. He was already dressed in his favorite navy blazer, white shirt, and beige chinos. "Not yet. Let's save it as a surprise for the party." I smiled as I fixed his neat collar. I didn't miss the momentary flash of anxiety that crossed his eyes. "It's all right. This is your special day." I gently stroked the head of my son, who was trying to put on a brave smile. At 2 p.m., the first guests began to arrive. 5 of Ethan's classmates and their parents, along with 3 close neighborhood families. Children's laughter echoed through the garden, and adults exchanged light conversation. The party was enveloped in a warm atmosphere under the spring weather. What a lovely party! When I heard that voice, my spine froze. I turned to find Eleanor standing there. A tweed suit with a pearl necklace. Perfectly styled white hair and a somewhat cold smile. "Ethan, aren't you going to greet your grandmother?" Her voice held none of the softness she usually displayed as a philanthropist. Ethan stood frozen, managing only a small "hello." "That posture is disrespectful to a lady." Eleanor's voice cut sharply through the air. Ethan hurriedly straightened his back. I tried to intervene, but Eleanor had already found her next target. "Oh my, this cake." Eleanor looked down at the Whole Foods cake I had prepared, her face twisted in disapproval. "This is hardly appropriate for a Wilson family birthday party. I've specially ordered a custom cake." She signaled to her chauffeur waiting in the passenger seat to bring in an elaborate box. The champagne gold box gleamed with the logo of a high-end patisserie. As time passed, the party proceeded according to schedule. The children were engaged in games, and the adults were chatting in groups. However, beneath this superficial tranquility, a palpable tension was steadily building. Eleanor continued her relentless criticism of Ethan's every move. "What kind of walking is that? You're speaking too roughly with your friends. You lack the dignity befitting a Wilson family child." Ethan's shoulders gradually hunched, and his smile faded. The parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, and the children slowly began to keep their distance. Then came the fateful moment. "Now, it's time for cake," Eleanor announced grandly. Her special cake had been placed in the center, while the one I had prepared was pushed to the side. "Happy birthday to you." As everyone began singing, a faint smile returned to Ethan's face. But that smile didn't last long. "Now, Ethan. Let's open your presents." Just as Ethan timidly reached for the box Eleanor held out, it happened. "Stop." Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip. "With that attitude, you don't deserve to receive presents." The atmosphere froze. "You're a disgrace to this family." Eleanor's voice transformed into hysterical screams. "Such an incompetent child couldn't possibly share Wilson blood. You're unworthy of this lineage. There's nothing about you worth celebrating." In that instant, Eleanor grabbed the special cake in front of her and hurled it at Ethan's face. Champagne gold cream covered Ethan's face. Children screamed. Adults gasped. Complete silence. My body moved almost before I was conscious of it. "Ethan." I held my trembling son tightly. "It's okay. Mama's here." My voice was surprisingly calm. As I gently wiped the cake from Ethan's face, I turned my back on the scene with dignity. "Wait. We're not finished." Cutting off Eleanor's voice, Robert stood up. His face showed an anger I had never seen before. "Get out now." His voice carried years of suppressed emotion. "Robert, you're my son, aren't you?" "Why?" "That's enough. Leave this place immediately." The color drained from Eleanor's face. She tried to compose herself when she noticed the stares around her, but it was too late. Her true nature had been exposed in that moment. The party effectively ended there. Parents led their children away, apologizing awkwardly as they left. Only Sarah stayed until the end, helping with the cleanup. That night, Ethan didn't say a word. My husband and I exchanged only the most necessary words. We just sat together, the three of us, spending quiet time close to one another. The next morning, our house was wrapped in deep silence. Though the spring sunlight remained bright and the tulips in the garden bloomed vibrantly, a heavy atmosphere hung inside the house. Ethan had been plagued by nightmares all night. I visited his room many times, wiping his sweaty forehead and holding his trembling body. Even after dawn, he wouldn't come out of his room. "Let's let him stay home from school for a few days," Robert said quietly at the breakfast table. Dark circles under his eyes showed evidence of a sleepless night. "Yes, that would be best," I replied while pouring fresh coffee into Robert's cup. I didn't mention that I had already made an appointment with Dr. Collins, Greenwich's most respected child psychologist. The first consultation was scheduled for 2 days after the party. Dr. Collins's office was in a historic building just off Greenwich Avenue. Opening the heavy Victorian-style door, we were greeted by a warm waiting room. "Ethan, there's nothing to worry about. It's just a conversation." Ethan remained silent, gripping my hand tightly. In the consultation room, Dr. Collins requested to speak with Ethan alone first. After 40 minutes, she called me in with a serious expression. "Mrs. Wilson, there are things we need to discuss." What followed exceeded my worst imaginings. Eleanor's psychological abuse had been ongoing long before the birthday party. Weekend lessons, church events, family gatherings, Eleanor had been cornering Ethan at every opportunity. "You're a disgrace to the Wilson family. With that attitude, I can't acknowledge you as my grandchild. If you can't be perfect, you don't deserve to be loved." These words had been deeply etched into Ethan's heart. On our way home from the consultation, I received a call from Sarah. "Can you talk now?" There was urgency in her voice. Meeting at a nearby Starbucks reserve, Sarah handed me a thick envelope. "These are all the evidence regarding Eleanor." The envelope contained multiple testimonial records, social media post records, and audio recordings. Ethan wasn't Eleanor's only victim. Children participating in church charity activities, especially those from families she deemed unworthy, had been targeted. But why didn't anyone? It's her position. She's a church pillar and known philanthropist, right? Everyone stayed quiet, thinking no one would believe them. Sarah's words tightened my chest. I resolved to consult with a lawyer. I made an appointment with Johnson and Partners, the most trusted law firm in Greenwich. And then, an unexpected visitor appeared the following morning. At 9 a.m., the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Eleanor stood there. Her usual perfect appearance was nowhere to be seen. Her makeup was disheveled, her hair unkempt. Instead of her luxury brand tweed suit, she wore a simple dress. In her arms, she held a box with obviously expensive wrapping. "Please, let me see Ethan." Her voice was hoarse. "I'm sorry, but that's..." "Please, just 5 minutes." Eleanor attempted to kneel at my feet, almost like a Japanese daijisa. "This is for Ethan." Her voice trembled as she held out the expensive box. Then, suddenly, she broke down crying. I was the same. Through her tears, Eleanor began to speak. About her own abuse from her mother 30 years ago. Days of being demanded perfection. And the pain of miscarriage experienced under that pressure. But that's no excuse, my voice remained calm. Past suffering is no reason to hurt others. But if you're truly remorseful, you should first seek professional help. Then apologize to all the children and families you've harmed. The color drained from Eleanor's face. "We haven't reported this to the police yet. But if you try to approach Ethan again, we will submit all the evidence." I stated firmly. "Please leave. And never come near us again." Just before closing the door, I heard Eleanor's trembling voice. "I just wanted to be the perfect grandmother." At dusk, I reported the day's events to Robert. After a long silence, he slowly spoke. "Let's prepare for the final confrontation. I'll reserve the church meeting room." Days later, we were heading to the church meeting room. Ethan was absent from school, and Robert had taken time off work. In the car, I reviewed the files containing our documents. The evidence we had prepared over a week was perfect. Catherine Murphy, the sharp lawyer from Johnson and Partners, had told us during the previous day's meeting. With this much evidence, we could easily win a civil suit. But it's wise to have a discussion first. Several people had already gathered in the meeting room. Sarah, several church board members, and parents of children who had been victimized. All watched us with tense expressions. At exactly 10 a.m., Eleanor entered. She had returned to her usual dignified appearance, though the dark circles under her eyes couldn't be hidden. Behind her followed a lawyer in an expensive suit. "Let's begin," Catherine quietly started. First, Sarah stood up. "This is the evidence I've collected." The projector displayed records of Eleanor's social media posts. Behind her glamorous posts as a philanthropist were persistent criticisms of specific children and their families. Eleanor's face grew paler with each screen change. Next, the victims' parents began their testimonies. "My daughter quit the church choir." Eleanor told her, "Your voice lowers the choir's dignity." After the charity event, "My son stopped eating." She repeatedly criticized him, saying, "Your eating manner is vulgar." With each testimony, the atmosphere in the meeting room grew heavier. Eleanor's lawyer tried to interject several times but was powerless against the evidence. Then came the decisive evidence. "These are the church's financial records." One of the board members opened a thick file. Evidence of misappropriation of charitable funds that Eleanor had managed. Money meant for underprivileged children had apparently been used for her personal purposes. "Wait, this is..." Eleanor's voice trembled. "I can explain. Everything was for the church." At that moment, I quietly stood up. "Mrs. Eleanor." The meeting room fell completely silent. "Do you understand how many children you've hurt under the name of love?" My voice was surprisingly steady. "Demanding perfection is not love. Control is not love." Walking slowly closer, I continued. "And this is the final testimony." Ethan pulled out a watercolor painting with trembling hands. It was one he had painted. A church basement depicted in dark colors. There, a small boy curled up, trembling. "This is where I was locked up." Ethan's voice was small but clear. Grandmother said, "Stay here and think until you're sorry." The meeting room fell silent. All color drained from Eleanor's face. "Ethan." Then, I delivered the final blow. "I'm pregnant." Eleanor's eyes widened at the unexpected words. "I will never let you meet this new life. Protecting this child from someone like you, that's my responsibility as a mother." Robert stood up and came to stand beside me. "Mother, this is your last chance." His voice mixed sadness with determination. "Either acknowledge all your wrongs and sincerely apologize now, or we move forward with legal measures," Catherine calmly added. "Specifically, civil litigation, expulsion from the church, and..." She pulled out documents. "Complete removal from Wilson family asset management rights." Eleanor collapsed as if struck down. Her expensive pearl necklace rolled across the floor. I. Tears flowed from beneath her thick makeup. "I admit everything." With those words, Eleanor's dignity completely crumbled. The church, the assets, everything. Just please, forgive me. But it was too late. Goodbye, Mrs. Eleanor, my voice echoed quietly. Never show yourself before us again. As we left the meeting room, Ethan held mine and Robert's hands tightly. Outside, a fresh breeze heralded a new season. Young leaves swayed in the wind, and bright sunlight poured down. We embraced each other tightly, the three of us. From this moment, our new life would begin. Though wounded and suffering, we had found true love. And that love would never break. On the way home, Ethan spoke in a small voice. Mom, when the new baby comes, I'll protect them. At those words, tears welled up in my eyes. Not tears of sadness, but tears of hope. 1 year later in spring, Greenwich's streetscape retained its unchanging beauty. We had moved to a new home near Bruce Park. Our white colonial-style house caught the morning light gently, just like in Ethan's watercolors. 8 months pregnant with my large belly, I was making pancakes in the kitchen. The sweet aroma of maple syrup filled the room. Mom, look. Ethan waved happily from in front of his easel in the living room. Now 11 years old, his eyes no longer held their former anxiety. On the easel was a spring park scene. Trees painted in bright colors, playing children, and blue sky. It was a piece highly praised by his teacher at the Greenwich Art Society. It's beautiful. The sky color is especially lovely. At my words, Ethan beamed with a full smile. That smile would never be taken from him again. I want to paint one more. For my little sister. Yes, we had recently learned the baby was a girl. We had already chosen the name Emily. I'm sure Emily will love it, Robert smiled gently, looking up from his newspaper. He had recently transferred to a different department at the investment bank, choosing a life that allowed him to spend more time with family. News of Eleanor occasionally reached us. After being expelled from the church, she had lost most of her assets and started living alone in a small Manhattan apartment. We heard she was undergoing mandatory counseling. She might be able to change, Sarah said one day over coffee. She was now establishing a new organization for abuse prevention. The circle of victim support was steadily growing, centered around First Presbyterian Church. But she'll never appear before us again, I said, and Sarah nodded quietly. The changes extended to the entire community. Following Eleanor's incident, many people became more open to discussing family issues. The illusion of the perfect family gradually crumbled. It doesn't have to be perfect. True love is enough, Ethan murmured on our way home from a family dinner at the Trading Post. At those words, Robert and I exchanged glances. In our new home's living room, Ethan's watercolors are displayed. Bright landscape paintings, peaceful seascapes, and one special picture. An image of the three of us holding hands, with a blank space for his yet unseen sister. I finished our new family picture, Ethan said as he put down his final brush. Outside the window, cherry blossoms swayed in full bloom. Since that day a year ago, we had lost many things and gained new ones. A family bound by stronger, deeper bonds despite our wounds. Oh, She's moving, I said, and Ethan rushed over to gently place his hand on my belly. Emily, I can't wait to meet you. At that moment, the baby moved energetically again, as if responding to her brother's voice. Sometimes when walking down Greenwich Avenue, we pass by our old house. But there's nothing to fear anymore. We accept the past for what it is and pass on what we've learned to our new life. Love doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be true. One evening, while driving Ethan to and from his art class, that thought crossed my mind. The life in my belly moved gently again. The spring breeze carried fresh hope like young leaves. Our new story begins from here. Not seeking perfection, just loving and supporting each other. Because that's what makes a real family. On the way back from a prenatal checkup, the bells of Christ Church Greenwich rang in the distance. They no longer feel oppressive as they once did. Now they sound like hopeful chimes announcing the start of a new day. Mom, Ethan holds my hand. Are you happy? I answered without hesitation. Yes, very much so. And that was the absolute truth.